and welcome to Two Friends Watch. My name's Daniel, and with me is my good friend Andrew.
Hello, I'm Andrew, joining you from Arbroath for once, because we're recording this on Friday rather than Wednesday.
I know, mixing things up, Andrew, mixing things up.
I know, it sounds the same wherever I am, but I just thought listeners might want to know that, just sort of the trivial movements of my own life.
Oh, fun-filled and exciting from start to finish.
What else do you listen to this show for?
Exactly. Also, on another note, I think we've reached our 50 download / stream mark on the show. So that's quite interesting. It actually is 61, but between me downloading a lot when we first started and you, Andrew, downloading several when we first started, I roughly knock off about 10 or 11 from whatever the actual count is. So we've actually probably just about reached our 50 download mark.
Great.
We have some interesting places indeed. I mean, everywhere ranging from Australia, Spain, Brussels, a couple in Brussels, Netherlands, quite a few in central London. I don't know anybody in central London. Andrew?
No, not here.
No,
so,
we have quite a few.
But next thing you know, Two Friends Watch World Tour.
That's it. We're going to have t-shirts and car stickers and all sorts of things.
The trappings of global fame.
Oh, it's going to be too stressful. We're going to have to quit.
Yeah, we're just going to have to, we have to quit or we'll stab each other to death in a tour bus or something.
Yeah, that's going to be it. You're going to die from a drug-crazed binge and I'm going to die of old age because I'm not that interesting.
Yeah, which leads us into our film.
Old Age, leading up to the film Up, the 2009 film by Pixar Animation Studios and released by Walt Disney Pictures.
Yeah, and your pick for our picture this week.
I thought, we've had a few obscure movies, had a couple of horror, a couple of action. I figured we just want something light-hearted just to break it all up, just to confirm that we are going to try and touch on at least every genre now and again.
Yeah, let's try that. So, for the start of this light-hearted family romp of a film, let's have a montage of a couple aging into obscurity and suffering apparently from a miscarriage, which kind of took me aback.
That is a very intense start to this movie. Perhaps one of the best silent stories I've ever seen of the modern era. There is no sound as such, music, but other than that, there's almost, no conversation as such. You don't get dragged into a plot. It's just one scene after another, aging, growing up, traumatic events, death.
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary the way this film opens, and if there's really any weakness to this film, which I'll go on record as saying right now I love, probably my favorite Pixar animation, probably tied with WALL-E, I reckon. But if I have to criticize it for anything, it's that it never really matches those opening scenes in terms of emotional impact.
No, it doesn't.
That opening montage. But I suppose we're getting ahead of ourselves. What's the film actually about?
Well, Up, briefly, is about an old man whose wife has died a while ago. Never really found out how long between the opening scene and the start of the actual adventure. But she's died, he lives by himself, he's grumpy, and he has an incident with a construction worker. He's being forced into a retirement home, and he takes off in a house lifted and flown by hundreds and hundreds of balloons. He does, however, also accidentally pick up a young Boy Scout-esque child, and a talking dog, and a colourful flightless bird on their adventure. But, they head, as you do, and they head to South America, have a big adventure, and the whole purpose is so that he can take his house to where his deceased wife wanted to go, Paradise Falls.
Which is in Venezuela, correct?
Yes, according to the documentary, they did an awful lot of research into the topography and the environment.
Yeah, because it's really vividly realized in film. So the very beginning of the film actually takes us back several decades, actually, because it actually begins with our hero, Carl Fredricksen, as a young boy. We don't actually get a year because, it's sort of ambiguous whether this is taking place in the real world, but it's in what seems to be Depression-era America.
I would say that's about right.
Yeah, because judging by the sort of dilapidated houses and the sort of newsreel footage, seems to be sort of the mid-30s or thereabouts. But he's just growing up as this young boy who's fascinated by this adventurer, Charles Muntz, who takes off to South America and desperately wants to capture this rare bird.
Yeah, because Muntz is as we are told at the start, a world-famous explorer. He's done countless adventures and got lots of acclaim. However, his latest adventure, he comes back with the skeleton of this giant flightless bird. And the scientists get a little cranky. They start, complaining that he made it all up. He's, ridiculed, removed of all of his fame and fortune. Well, his fame. And humiliated. So he vows that he'll go back to South America and not return until he gets the bird.
So anyway, back to Carl Fredricksen for the moment. He's like this... He's the biggest fan of Charles Muntz in the whole wide world, and he meets his second biggest fan, if you like, who's a young girl called Ellie, who's really hyperactive and enthusiastic about everything, and who just really gets along with him like a house on fire.
And it's really funny, these two characters, because Ellie, she's not on screen for very long, but you straight away fall in love with her as a character. The small few lines that she has just instantly makes you befriend her. And the funny part is, and a brilliant part of storytelling, is that she is the polar opposite of Carl. He is quiet, subdued, doesn't say much, keeps to himself. She is all about the action, adventure, loud and brash, and it's amazing how these two connect.
Yeah, I think in that whole opening sequence where we see them as kids, I think the only word Carl utters in that whole sequence is no. He just sort of exclaims it when he hears that Charles Muntz has been accused of fraud. That's the only word he actually speaks. When he's together with Ellie, he can't get a word in edgewise. Yeah. So from there, the two of them just sort of team up and they talk about or rather she talks about her ambition to get the house over to Venezuela and sort of set up at Paradise Falls. And they just sort of bond over this, and it ends up blossoming into this sort of lifelong happy relationship. They get married, and they move into this house together where they first met.
Yeah, and the house, everything's connected, which is such a brilliant bit of artwork. The house is, as we see at the start, the clubhouse.
Yeah.
That is at the start of the movie. Now that's the house that they live in, and that's the house that Carl has his adventures in. And the whole idea of these balloons, which is a major theme throughout the whole movie, is because their very first, quotation marks, adventure was when Carl lost his balloon, and she made him go and get it, and he falls and hurts himself. But ever since that, they have this connection through balloons.
Yeah, and we actually see over the course of this wordless montage that Carl makes his living over the course of his life as a balloon salesman. And how you afford like the mortgage on a big suburban house on the sort of salary as a theme park balloon salesman, I'm not entirely sure. I guess that just must be the Depression-era housing market sort of working in their favor.
I think you might be looking into that one a bit too deeply there, Andrew.
Perhaps. I suppose we could just take it for the sort of symbolic gesture that it is. But there's a lot of... because this montage really does set up the entire emotional spine of the rest of the film. It sort of establishes little visual throwbacks like the letterbox that they first get together, which he inadvertently leaves his handprint on, and so does she, which becomes a sort of memento of their relationship throughout all of the subsequent decades.
Yeah, but then very early on as well, you also get a very dark turn. She becomes pregnant, you see these happy scenes of painting a nursery, having, so much laughter and joy about, the upcoming child. And then the scene cuts away to a doctor basically telling her something, and she's crying, and even the palette of this scene is dark. It's all dull colours. Everything. The rest of the movie, bright, vivid yellows and oranges and everything in your face, except for this part, where it's dark and depressing, and you just can tell the change of tone, the change of palette, everything brings it down, and you know something, and you never find out what, and you don't need to know what, but something terrible has happened with the child and with Ellie, and the fact that for the rest of the movie, there is a spark that is gone from her.
Yeah, well, for the rest of the montage, I suppose, because we don't actually see her in person.
But for several scenes, and each of these scenes represent a long period of time, but for several scenes afterwards, she's just a shell of who she used to be. And eventually, you get the impression years later she kind of brings herself back around. But for a good proportion of her life, it seems that she was a husk compared to who she was.
Yeah, it's quite sad to see because originally she's like the animating force of this whole relationship. She's the one who sort of gives life to Carl. She's the one who always spurs him on and gives him strength. And we see that relationship getting reversed from this point onwards. It's a really powerful bit of adult emotional reality that I wasn't expecting at all.
No, I mean, this is such a powerful film. More than people give it credit for.
Yeah, sort of surprised me actually because I hadn't seen the film since it originally came out in the cinema back in 2009. I'd actually forgotten about that particular detail, and it really struck me quite hard.
One other particular detail, and I think I'm right in saying this. I'm pretty sure I was right in saying this. Do you notice that the priest that was present when they got married is also the doctor when she got the bad news?
I did not notice that, no.
No, I'm pretty sure. I'm about 95% sure that is the same character.
Okay. I'll take your word for it.
I always thought it was just a weird thing.
I don't know, maybe it's just sort of Pixar recycling animation designs. Maybe that's how they save on their budgets. Who knows?
Who knows? But, as they get older, they develop a new goal for themselves, and it is the same goal as they started for, of going to Paradise Falls. So they start saving money in a jar, and then the scenes continue. The car breaks down, they break the jar, they use the money. I think a tree falls over or something like that. They break the jar. That's it, tree falls in their house, they break the jar, they use the money. And it's just again and again and again, to the point where they become very, very old people.
Yeah, they're having to compromise on this dream of theirs over and over again over the course of their lives, and it's really quite a melancholy sequence. That's they seem to be living a contented, happy life, but there's this something missing throughout the whole thing. Just this one unfulfilled goal that Ellie eventually goes to her grave, never having quite fulfilled.
And that last part of this montage, I mean, that's also a very heavy hitter. Basically, Carl makes a decision. He will save up and get those tickets. He gets the tickets. They're both very old at this point. He gets the tickets. He takes her up to a picnic spot that they've been to several times in previous scenes where he's going to surprise her. He goes up the hill and she's lagging behind and she collapses. And the next scene is her in the hospital and then him at a funeral.
Yeah, and I should point out again that everything we've been talking about for the last 10 minutes or so is all expressed wordlessly. It's all done purely through visual signifiers.
Apart from the very, very first scene where they're kids, that's about 2 minutes of a bit of conversation, but then it moves straight into the silent montage, and then that tells... I mean, it tells such a powerful story in a 10-minute section.
I know. You could almost isolate that whole chunk of the movie and just release that as a short film. And
absolutely.
It would be the most critically acclaimed thing in the whole world.
I mean, Andrew, have you seen some of Pixar's shorts?
Only the ones that are in front of the feature-length movies they release.
Yeah, I mean, you go on the internet, you can find them, but even their 5-minute shorts... you end up, falling for these characters that get established in seconds. And it's like, they have really powerful storytelling techniques that always seems to get me.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's a cliche at this point for sort of film nerds to gush over Pixar and just how masterful their technique is over and over and over again, just how consistent their track record is. But it really, when consensus is right, it's right.
Yeah.
Pixar really, maybe not so much recently. I haven't seen so much of their more recent stuff, but the general critical acclaim for stuff like Cars 2 and Planes and Brave hasn't been quite as enthusiastic.
No, and Pixar, with the period of time that Pixar made this movie and made the previous movies and a couple of movies after it, they made great movies, one after another of great movies. And out of that string of great movies, I would still say this is one of the best.
Yeah, I think this is probably just towards the end of the period where they were at the absolute top of their game.
Yeah.
This, WALL-E, Finding Nemo, The Incredibles, probably ending with Toy Story 3, I reckon.
Still waiting for The Incredibles 2. Just want to throw that back out there again. Just
the one that actually warrants a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
No more Cars films. Fuck off.
Please, no more Cars films. But the movie moves after the funeral. A generic period of time passes. You never really told how long, but the idea is that he's moved on a little bit and getting on with his life, and his house is now surrounded by all these building works because advancement in society involves destroying quaint old houses and building tower blocks.
He's adamantly refusing to move. Like, his house is just occupying this one little patch of land in amongst this huge construction site while he's still got his immaculately kept porch and lawn out the front. And it's probably my favorite shot of the film, actually, where you just see him walking out onto his porch and the camera pulls back in a series of axial cuts. And you just see this sort of diorama of his tiny wee suburban home, just surrounded by all these massive monolithic skyscrapers just being built up around them.
It's so sad as well. And then this is another sad part of the movie. I'm going to say that a lot because this movie has great highs and fantastic lows. And this is one of the lows. Is this particular day, a lorry or I think some kind of digger is backing back, and it crushes his fence and it snaps the mailbox. And this is the mailbox that is kind of a memorabilia to him, reminds him of Ellie. It's a really close thing.
Well, much like the whole house itself. That's the sort of the reason he's adamant not to move.
And this young construction supervisor goes over and says, oh, don't worry about that, we'll get that replaced, I'm really sorry. Here, let me take that so I can replace it. Now, Coral, he's angry, he's upset, he can't get the words out, and he's starting to fight with this young guy, and one thing leads to another, and he kind of hits this young man. But
no, let's not mince words, he hits him, he bashes him proper.
Yeah, but it's not like a massive 2x4 hits him with a hammer or a nail or something.
It wasn't meant maliciously.
Yeah, he just kind of bonks him on the head, but people nowadays, let's sue him.
Yeah, well, this is obviously established that the construction worker, or rather the construction manager, is basically out to get him, and any pretext he can jump on to get him labeled a public menace and get him off the land, he's going to take it.
And Carl's not a stupid person. He knows straight away that this is it. What he's just done by assaulting this young worker, that's now blown his chance of staying here. And basically the next scene is people coming to take him away.
Yeah, but before they're able to, he doesn't give them that chance.
No.
He finally puts into motion his master plan, and sort of, I have to wonder, if all the balloon salesmen in the world sort of got ideas after watching this movie, because he's got basically all the tanks of helium he can get, and he's attached all these massive hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of balloons to his house, which he all inflates all in one go, which is enough to raise his house off the ground and bear him to South America.
Yeah, and it is fantastic to watch.
Yeah, it's a really inspired visual.
Oh, I mean, it must have required so much time and resources and animation, man hours, to get all these colours and vibrant, physics effects of balloons bashing past each other. And we're not talking several, we're talking hundreds and hundreds of balloons. And it's actually quite interesting because I'm going through a Mythbuster stint right now, still. And Mythbusters did an episode that kind of reminded me of this. They've done 2 balloon episodes, but the one that came to my mind was how many balloons does it require to lift a child off the ground? Not a house, not a person like an adult, a child. And to get a 44-pound child off the ground, it took 3,500 balloons.
Did they get him back down?
They just let the child rise up a couple of feet and then let her down.
But
that's 3,500 to lift a child. Now, again, this is a child's movie. Obviously, the physics isn't going to be correct, but there were well less than 3,500 balloons, and it was lifting the entire house.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you have to admit, cartoon physics, it's come on.
Yeah, but
I do recall there was a Darwin Award once where a guy had a sort of near-death experience doing exactly this. He attached a bunch of heavy-duty weather balloons to his lawn chair.
Yeah, Lawn Chair Larry, the man who soared 16,000 feet with weather balloons.
You've been doing your research. I'm impressed.
I've been flying. I'm just browsing through the internet while we're doing this. But no, I did. It was all part. Again, it was all kind of part of the MythBusters episode. It was a fantastic episode. But yeah, he got arrested and said he definitely wouldn't do that again. But it looked quite interesting.
Yeah, it seems like it would be worth trying.
I don't know. But so basically, he takes off in this house, and there's several scenes where he's flying between the giant skyscrapers, and it's all visually fantastic.
But there's a hitch.
There is a hitch, rather a large hitch.
Because before he took off, there was a young boy came round to his house named Russell, who's this sort of, I don't know, what exactly, I think they call it a wilderness scout or something like that.
A young wilderness explorer.
Who's just trying to get the last badge he needs for assisting the elderly, as he phrases it himself. He's got this massive sash covered with all the other badges he could possibly have earned. But he needs this one last one just to get his graduation.
Mm-hmm.
And he's, again, sort of boundlessly enthusiastic and immediately gets on Carl Fredricksen's nerves for this reason, because, he's totally overzealous and wanting to help in anything he can possibly do. But for whatever reason, one thing leads to another. He ends up on the porch of his house.
Yeah, as the house is flying. And it's quite a funny scene. He knocks on the door and
Carl he thinks he must have misheard.
Yeah, and he goes out and I can't remember quite how it goes, but basically young Russell's like, "Please let me in, sir." And Carl stands there for a second. "No!" Slams the door. And then this young boy is standing on the porch, gripping onto the walls, scared for his life as this house rises higher and higher. And then seconds later, the door opens. Come on in then. The little boy shoots in. Oh, it was such a funny scene.
Yeah, it's like, because Carl's just so cantankerous and just totally abrasive to everyone else. And it just makes for some great comedy when he's surrounded by all these people who are just sort of so boundlessly enthusiastic about everything.
And it's really, at this point, it's established that Carl is a bit of a misery. And he could quite realistically have just left that boy out on the porch. Because it's not surprising when he slams the door and you go, can't believe you did that, but I can believe you did that.
Yeah. So
it was quite nice that he let the boy in. But then, again, after a bit of a high, as this movie is, that was a pun, actually.
Yeah, very good.
That's quite good.
We end up on a bit of a downer.
Because there is a very severe thunderstorm, and you can see that Carl really struggles to hold on to controlling the house. And eventually, everything dies down, and they end up, through dumb luck,
exactly where they plan to be.
exactly where they plan to be.
Or rather, almost exactly where they plan to be.
Yeah, I think it's by the looks of it, it's a couple of days' walk. But, it's nothing too strenuous.
Yeah, they're basically stranded on this sort of Venezuelan steppe at the top of this cliff, and they have to just sort of march around to the scenic location, Paradise Falls, where they want it to be.
Yeah.
Because the house at this point is sort of suspended just a few meters off the ground, because a lot of the balloons have burst or flown away or whatever.
Yeah, in the storm.
But they're using the garden hose, as it turns out, just through pure chance, which Carl sort of tethers to himself, and he's just sort of pulling the house along while it's still suspended.
And very quickly, or soon after, they've been walking for a little while, they come across a very tall, colourful, flightless bird, who is quickly named Kevin.
Kevin, which becomes ironic later on for reasons that will subsequently be discussed.
And Kevin is basically tags along with Russell and Carl. And you can see that Russell falls in love with Kevin. He plays and it's fun. Carl, not so much.
No, it's like Carl he just wants to be left alone. He's an old grouch, so he just wants to carry on frog marching as far as he can possibly take this house and get to Paradise Falls.
And it's quite funny, this, because the way the bird reacts actually is very accurate to how an animal would react to most people who don't like animals. You get a dog that like some people, and then you get that one person who, I hate dogs. I hate them so much, and I hate your dog. And dogs kind of get this feel if they're kind of being threatened towards. They know these things, and they will act aggressively towards this one person.
I know, I used to be that one person.
Yes, and it's fantastic because this isn't a real animal by any sense of the word. Like, I don't know what it's meant to be based on, but maybe some sort of ostrich thing. I don't know what it's meant to be based
more like
on.
A sort of giant flamingo, maybe?
Yeah,
like
but it behaves like a genuine animal, where Russell, being friendly, kind towards it, feeds it chocolate, the animal is nice to him. And Carl, although he never really attacks the animal or hurts it, he dislikes it. And the bird picks up on that. And I just think it's, again, another great bit of writing that they managed to basically portray a completely natural animal instinct.
Yeah, it's really quite a feat of animation, quite cool. I think we should probably talk a little bit about some of the character designs in this movie, because that plays a big role in this, I think, because you've got, Pixar, they're not realists when it comes to animation. I'm sure I don't need to tell anyone that, but I think the character design is quite symbolic, if you like, in this movie, particularly for Carl Fredricksen himself, who's very square.
Yeah.
If you know, his head occupies about 80% of his mass,
which is quite funny. It's ridiculous, but it isn't distracting.
No, because everything behaves in a way that's physically consistent. Mm-hmm. But because of all these sort of straight edges and straight lines, it sort of complements his very rigid personality, this sort of personality of him being very set in his ways.
Yeah, his character is actually based, or partially based, on Spencer Tracy, apparently.
Really?
And if you see a picture of Spencer Tracy, there is one on the Wikipedia article for Up, and they mention this. Just this one particular picture, that is a perfect humanization of Carl Fredricksen. It is a square head, big, thick rimmed glasses, and a big nose and big ears. That is exactly Carl Fredricksen in human form. It's actually eerie to see.
And of course, he's obviously directly contrasted with Russell, because the two of them are often sort of shown in the same shot throughout the film. And, Russell, by contrast, is very rotund. He's very round. Mm-hmm. He's all sort of soft edges. And he's sort of vaguely egg-shaped, I guess.
Which is kind of funny, because, young people at that age are, can be packing a few extra pounds. So it's not weird to see a young boy of his age being a bit on the chubby side. So he both looks natural, or as natural as this movie gets, and contrasts Carl's physique in several ways.
Yeah, and again, the sort of personality corresponds to that because, he's so, I guess, naive to the ways of the world and so open and receptive to everything around him. He's very sort of spongy, if you like.
Yeah. And it's interesting, and it really does bounce off of Coral's personality really well. I mean, Coral, he's grumpy, doesn't really want to be involved with people, but he's quite a wise man. You get this impression that he does know a lot about the world, sort of thing. And young Russell is the opposite. He doesn't really know things. He doesn't, he gets confused, he gets stuck, he doesn't really take his own initiative. But he wants to learn. He wants to soak up knowledge. And they're completely polar.
Yeah, it's really quite a cool characterization and character design. And like you were saying about the birds, the one thing I really like about the bird, and one thing that's really quite comedic, is the eye. I think you only ever see one eye at a time. And the eye is completely unmoving, unblinking, just staring straight ahead, regardless of like the character of the bird's mood or its physical movement at the time. The eye remains completely fixed.
I never noticed that, but yeah, I think you're right on that one. I'd never noticed that until now. That's fantastic.
Yeah. And it's just it makes for really. I heard a theory once that comedy is largely based on how robotic a person's body can be made. And that's sort of the real genius of this bird's design, is that it's really animated. It's flying all over the place and flapping its wings. But it's totally expressed through the movement of the body, not the face.
Yeah.
I really just think that's brilliant because it's difficult to express unless you actually see it in motion. But it's just everything this bird does is just becomes slightly funny just because of how it looks.
Yeah, and it also helps that it's twice as tall as both Carl and Russell, and it's brightly coloured, and it makes a terrible noise, which is just a ridiculous sound for any animal to make, and it's got a lot of funny to it.
Yeah, but shortly after this, we meet probably my favourite comic relief character, probably my favourite character in the movie, actually, which is Doug.
Doug. This is a dog.
Well,
dog.
A dog.
Yep. Doug the dog. Golden retriever, by the looks of it. And has a special collar that allows him to speak.
Yeah, which is a mystery to begin with, but does get explained not long thereafter. And the dog is voiced by Bob Peterson, and basically speaks perfect English, but is basically just giving voice to all the thoughts that you reckon a golden retriever might be thinking at any given moment. For instance, I'm trying to think exactly of an example of dialogue, but it's like, "Hello, you are my master."
Yeah, well, this is it's an interesting movie because the voice, and I can't find where, but apparently Bob Peterson must have done some writing for this as well.
Oh yeah,
because it says here Peterson knew he would voice Doug when he wrote his line, "I have just met you and I love you."
Yeah.
Which is based on what a child told him when he was a camp counselor in the 80s. So Bob Peterson must have perhaps wrote some of the lines for the character Doug. And that is a perfect representation of what this character is like. He is loyal, simplistic, straightforward, and lovable in every aspect.
Yeah, I'm actually just having a look at the IMDb page now, and he has actually participated in the screenplay writing for 2 Pixar films, this being one and the other is Finding Nemo.
Yeah, so he must have known he was going to, voice his character.
He's also done the voice work for a lot of the other Pixar films, so I think he had quite a hand in creating this character.
But this character is fantastic. I mean, he really is wonderful. And he, again, is another comic relief character, as is the bird. They both play a comic relief, which you think, that's too much. That's too much in the movie. It's gotten silly now. But they're both comic reliefs in very different styles.
Yeah, and somehow it just never gets grating. It never becomes cloying or anything, which is just sort of testament to Pixar's writing skills, really. And they just they carry on their march. Doug and the bird, Kevin, tailing behind Carl, entirely against his wishes. He's getting really aggravated at this point.
And they get ambushed by a pack of dogs.
Also with collars.
Yep, also with talking collars, led by the lead dog, Alpha.
I think we should probably throw up a spoiler warning at this point.
Yeah, that would probably be a good point. So if you want to hear how this movie ends, you can do one of two things. You can watch the movie, or you can listen to the rest of this podcast. I would suggest doing both.
Yes, that's a good plan.
That is a very good plan. So watch the movie, then come back to listen to the rest of this. We'll wait. We'll wait.
We'll wait all day.
Yep. Right, that's long enough.
Done.
So, they get captured by a group of dogs led by Alpha. And Alpha is a Doberman-based dog who, and this is a recurring kind of joke, keeps having trouble with his voice settings. His voice box machine collar thing keeps breaking, and his voice moves up about 5 octaves. So he goes from like his deep, growly, intimidating character to this really high-pitched, squeaky, hilarious voice, which is fantastic.
And all the other dogs are completely taking the piss out of him for it. It's great.
Oh, it's fantastic. And
not quite 5 octaves. 5 is a lot of octaves.
That's true. I forget my music. 3?
Maybe 3 octaves.
3. We'll go with 3.
Right, yeah.
But they get rounded up and taken to this big airship that's hidden away, where they meet the owner of the pack of dogs, Alpha and Doug, who is Charles Muntz.
Carl Fredrickssen's old childhood hero, if you remember that far back.
Yep. And
who's now also an old man, of course.
Well, you see, this is the thing that confused me, and I'm just going to throw this one in here in the middle. When you see Carl Fredricksen as a young boy, I mean, he's a fairly young boy, 8, 9, that sort of thing.
Yeah, you put him about 8, 9.
Yeah.
Whereas Charles Muntz must have been about, even if we're conservative, say about 30.
Yeah, 30, mid-30s. Now, Carl has aged to the point where, where would you say? Well, actually, it says here, apparently he's 78 years old when the adventure takes place.
Well, that makes sense because, I mean, if we agree that it's Depression-era times and if the movie takes place in modern day, which would be 2009, that's about 70 years.
Well, let's go by this value, 78. So, going from 8 to 78, that's a 70-plus increase in age gap. That means that, conservatively, Charles F. Muntz must be 100.
Yeah, late
minimum.
90s, early 100s.
Yes, minimum, very late 90s, early 100s.
So, you know, he's keeping himself in shape.
Yeah, now, again, kids' movie, obviously there's going to be a few plot holes, but I saw this and I went, well, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's kind of because, I mean, like, Carl's meant to be at the sort of very tail end of his life. It's a key theme to the movie, so for someone who's like a full generation older than him to be his main adversary.
Yeah, and they match each other. They are both pretty much the same age at this point.
And it is something that sort of bugs me over the course of the movie. Carl seems to get a bit more spry as it goes on.
Yeah, it's a tiny distraction, but it's just one that is there at the back of my head from about halfway in this movie till the end. It just bugs me again and again and again.
Yeah, because we see at the very beginning he has trouble. He has to sort of crack his back about half a dozen times just to get out of bed in the morning. Towards the end, he's participating in like these full-blown Indiana Jones style set pieces.
Yeah, I mean, it's, sword fights and everything. But anyway, I digress. Just a little thing I want to throw in there that kind of bugs me about the movie. But Muntz invites Carl and Russell aboard his airship. By which point, by the way, Kevin just disappears. He hears the dogs coming during the ambush and just darts into the trees and is gone. So they get on board and Muntz shows them around, shows them his collection of things.
Carl's completely fangasming at the moment.
Oh, yeah, his mind is just melting. Russell seems fairly impressed, but Carl is just falling apart, falling at this guy's feet practically. And then the movie takes a bit of a sinister turn, because Russell... Oh, God damn it, Russell. Just keep your mouth shut. Just shut up. Please, just stop talking. He mentions that this bird that Muntz is obsessed with and desperate to catch, it's like his best friend, Kevin.
Yeah, sounds an awful lot like him, doesn't it?
The same bird Russell.
The same bird that Muntz has been dedicating the last 70 years of his life to catching isn't, in fact, the same flightless bird that Carl and
Russell
have come across.
Yeah,
Kevin.
And Russell has befriended with chocolate. That's right, traps, dogs, 70 years of his life wasted because he could have used chocolate.
And we learn in turn that Muntz has in fact come across other people over the course of his life who have also been, he thinks, looking for this bird, and it's implied, done them in.
Yeah, he's basically killed them. And then, again, this is a bit of a weird thing, he gets the impression, or he comes to the conclusion, that obviously this 78-year-old man and an 8-year-old, 9-year-old, however old Russell is, boy, is obviously also trying to capture his bird. No, sorry, how did you come to that conclusion?
Because he's mental and senile.
Yeah, that is the only... at this point, I was like, well, that's a nonsense conclusion, so you must be crazy. And by the end of the movie, yeah, you're pretty sure he is crazy. You're like, yep, he is Gaga.
Worth pointing out that Muntz is actually the only celebrity voice actor on the whole cast of this movie. He's voiced by Christopher Plummer.
That name rings a bell. What else does he do?
Sound of Music, among many other things. He was the King Priam in Troy.
Yeah, see, this is two movies you've mentioned that I've not seen.
Oh, well, okay, you need to educate yourself, Daniel. Come on, we're doing a film podcast here. Come on.
I know, I've got, and look, I'm catching up. It's part of the podcast is so that I catch up. At some point, we need to do The Sound of Music.
No, we really don't. Don't watch The Sound of Music. Okay, I know you want to do various genres on this show, but I just don't like musicals.
We're going to have to do a musical occasionally. Okay, we'll make it a rare occasion, but we will have to do it occasionally.
Okay, can we do Sweeney Todd or something like that? Because, that one at least has throats getting slit and shit.
That's a musical by all accounts.
That's more my speed.
So he basically attacks Russell and Carl. They run away, escape. Doug helps them, so now Doug's been kicked out of the pack and he's ashamed. And they run away. And they get back to the house and they start moving the house again, because that is kind of what Carl wants to do. He just wants to get his house to Paradise Falls. He can see it. It is over there. Just all of this is a distraction to him.
Yeah, and he does eventually, to a certain degree, succeed. He manages to get just at the very edge of Paradise Falls, just as the last of the helium runs out.
Yep, and I think it's during that chase scene that we just mentioned that Kevin gets injured.
Mm-hmm. And Kevin is a girl, by the way.
Yeah, well, that's what we learn. So Kevin gets injured, and he has to rest on the house. So that, and he starts crying, and they realise that, yeah, Kevin is a girl.
But the thing is, Kevin has her babies waiting for her in another part of the jungle.
So now you see this distinct personality difference between Carl and Russell really show its colours, because Carl, miserable old man. Okay, he's helped a few people now in this adventure, but he's a miserable old man to the end, and he wants to get his house. This whole thing was for Ellie, and that is the only thing that matters to him. Russell, bubbly, young, innocent, he obviously wants to get Kevin to her babies. But Carl is determined, and they just push ahead. And eventually, Carl does... I think Carl does change his mind, doesn't he?
Yeah, because He has a look through Ellie's journal once he's got his house down and settled, but he realizes he's still just as alone as he ever was.
Well, but that's after Andrew. What happens next is they take Kevin to the edge of this labyrinth. Kevin is just about to be disappeared, go to freedom, and Muntz shows up and basically starts burning the house. And poor Coral has to make a decision. Does he rescue the house, which is now on fire, or does he rescue the bird and, help Russell? He chooses the house.
Yeah.
The bird gets captured. Russell is so angry. This is like the one time you see Russell completely shift moods. Like the rest of the movie, he's just constantly bubbling. Nothing brings him down. This just upsets him beyond all recognition. And Carl doesn't care. He takes the house to Paradise Falls. He plonks it, this very burnt house. Just as the last balloons kind of pop, it crashes onto the ground. And that's it. He goes into his house and he sits there and he feels awful. You can see from his demeanour and the way he looks, he looks so miserable. This is not what he wanted. And he gets the scrapbook, he looks through it, and he finds that Ellie filled in these missing pages, which was part of the reason he wanted to go to South America.
Yeah, and she's left him just this one last message, which is, thanks for the adventure, now go have a new one. Which is basically just all the impetus Carl needs to sort of leave all these sort of memories behind and sort of just consign it all to the past and start living his life anew, just making the most of the time he still has.
And it's at that moment, I would say that is probably the key moment where he gets closure.
Yeah, and that's sort of the emotional climax of the movie, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
And he resolves that he still has things to do, he still has stuff to live for, so he uses what time he has left to chuck all the furniture out of his house to lighten the load.
Yeah, but just before then, we find that Russell, in his bad mood, has decided he is going to rescue Kevin himself. So he grabs a leaf blower, ties himself to some balloons, and flies away, with Coral shouting after him. And Coral, as quick as he can, throws everything out of the house. Completely guts this house. And I think that's such a sad thing to see. Because this is a house that both himself and the audience have kind of become a bit connected to. You know, you see the two chairs where they always sit. You see pictures and furniture. And he just throws it through the window, throws it out the door as it smashes on the ground. And I know it's for a good purpose, but it's still quite hard to watch.
Well, that's sort of the whole message of the movie, isn't it? Just don't become overly attached to these mementos. But Carl just takes that lesson, as hard as it is for him to do and for us to watch. He goes ahead with it because, life now is more important than just preserving these memories of the past.
Yeah. So he lightens up the entire house and takes off after Russell, which by this point he's been captured. Good going, Russell.
Yeah, you're always a great help, Russell.
So Carl goes in and he rescues Kevin. He kind of goes to rescue Russell, but then he gets confronted by Charles Muntz. Meanwhile, Doug, who has been ridiculed and humiliated and I would say probably a bit beaten up by the...
He's been given the cone of shame.
Yeah, he has been given the cone of shame, which is...
I do not like the cone of shame.
And what happens is, I think he gets... I can't remember how he gets out the cone of shame.
I think he actually gets chucked around by some of the other dogs and it breaks.
So there's a bit of a fight and it breaks and he hides behind this steering wheel, like an old medieval pirate ship steering wheel, I don't know what you call that.
With all the spokes and what.
Yeah, with all the spokes. And he's hiding behind that as Alpha, which is quite a vicious dog, snarling and snapping through the spokes. And I thought this was great. Doug, in a moment of inspiration, grabs the cone of shame and sticks it on Alpha's head. As at that moment, his collar breaks again, because Charles fixes it, but it breaks again. So Alpha pulls out, he's wearing the cone of shame, and he's got a voice that's 3 octaves higher and sounds like somebody permanently on helium.
All the other dogs just riotous laughter. It's wonderful.
It's fantastic. And it's great to see a villain get defeated, but not through violence.
Yeah, just purely through humiliation.
Yeah, it was a nice, refreshing change, you know. And interestingly, Doug now, because he's defeated Alpha, kind of becomes the alpha dog. So
yeah, he becomes the new Alpha.
Yeah, he becomes the new Alpha, and it's quite funny.
The Chronicles of Riddick, you keep what you kill.
Yeah, man, that movie was great and awful.
It was just awful. I don't even know why I referenced it.
It's not a bad movie, it's just misunderstood.
But anyway, Up. It's a feature of Up I really like, is how the dogs are treated like these sort of stormtrooper minions.
Yeah.
But they're also really, like all dogs, they have really short attention spans, and they're easily distracted by things like balls or
squirrel.
Bones. Squirrel! And that actually comes into play in several of the action sequences where they're able to be distracted by squirrels or dogs or whatever.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite images, or at least one of the funniest images in the whole film, is seeing the dogs in the planes going after Carl. It's really smart because it's a Star Wars reference. It's a direct visual throwback to A New Hope.
I never noticed that.
Yeah, you just see all these dogs in the biplanes, and it sort of gives you these profile shots of each dog in turn where they're sort of giving their call signs. And it's exactly like the moment just in the third act of Star Wars where you see all the X-Wing pilots going towards the Death Star.
Yeah, I never noticed that.
It's a great visual reference. I love that.
And they are distracted by somebody shouting, "Squirrel!" and they get confused and they start shouting, where? And they crash into each other.
Yeah. While all this is going on, Carl is inside the blimp and he's fighting with Charles Muntz. That's pretty much the final confrontation at long last.
Yep, a 78-year-old man with a Zimmer frame and tennis balls versus a 100-year-old man with a ancient sword.
Yeah, which the movie does actually have a bit of fun with, because they try to whack each other with their respective weapons, and they both throw their backs out at the same time.
Oh, that's so funny.
It was a great sort of gag there.
So, this is the end of the movie now, this kind of final conflict. They get up on top of the airship, which is some kind of blimp sort of airship, and they're fighting on top, and they go into the house, and you could see that it's, now let me get this right, Kevin and Russell and Charles are trapped in the house. Well, Kevin and Russell are trapped in the house, and Charles is trying to get to him with a gun, because he's trying to kill, well, both of them, I presume. And poor Carl, he is holding on to the hose to try and keep the house from blowing away, because it's started to take off, and he doesn't want to lose them. So what he does is I think he shouts chocolate.
Yeah,
that was it.
Bird, he says chocolate, and the bird bursts through the window onto the airship, and the house drags Muntz off the side.
Yep,
and he falls to his death.
Muntz dies after them. And in a weird kind of sick irony, he gets tangled up in a couple of balloons, and doesn't make the jump because the balloons kind of hold him back, and then falls to his death. Yeah. Which is a really dark moment in this film.
Well, it's kind of a classic Disney villain death, isn't it? I mean, all your Disney villains have to die by falling.
Yeah.
Tradition.
I mean, you don't see him die. I suppose it's the nicest way of viewing somebody dying.
I guess so, yeah.
So after that, the movie pretty much wraps up with the house, because now it's been let go, because Carl had to catch the boy. The house disappears into the clouds, and you think, oh, well, that's doomed. You'll never see that again. As everybody basically commandeers, has now got control of the airship and flies it back home. And just as it's flying away, you get this one scene where the house has landed on Paradise Falls, exactly where it took off from when he emptied all the stuff. And the last scene of the house is the two chairs sitting beside each other where Coral and Ellie always used to sit.
Yeah. Such a lovely image, isn't
It's such a lovely image. And Russell gets his final badge.
Yeah, so it's a bit bittersweet because the house is left behind, but it is ultimately a very happy ending, very uplifting ending.
I think the saddest part is that Coral never knows. I mean, I know as we know as an audience, but for him, for the rest of his life, he will always think that his house got destroyed.
Yeah, but it's okay because he's past it. He's achieved
That's
emotional
true.
closure, if you like. So I think people will tend to oversell Pixar in terms of their subtlety. They are very gifted visual storytellers.
Oh, they are.
But they are, at the same time, quite broad in terms of the sort of emotions they're trying to evoke. And it is always quite obvious what they're going for, but that doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing in any way.
No, occasionally it's nice to have, just obvious personalities. Russell's bubbly, Doug, bubbly, bit silly, the bird, quite protective, also a bit of a comic relief, and Coral, miserable old man. And okay, their personalities develop and expand and they grow as a character, but they never change who they are as a core.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is fairly broad strokes when it comes to characterization. It's very easy to get a handle on who these characters are, but at the same time, it's extraordinarily sharp characterization.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's very clear who these people are. It's very clearly defined, and it's always perfectly consistent and congruent. And Pixar are great that way. And I think it's just pretty almost miraculous that they managed to make these string of films where they have such incredible technical merits, like all this just astoundingly good CG animation.
Yeah.
Like, speaking personally, I don't think I'll ever enjoy CG animation quite as much as hand-drawn. I don't even know why, it's just a sort of matter of personal preference, but for CG animation, taking it as you get it, Pixar's is probably the best in the world and always has been consistently.
It has. I mean, the thing is, it's, just looking at the stats of the movie, it's not a very long movie, 96 minutes running time.
Well, most kids' movies aren't.
Well, that's true. And but it made a real ton of money. The budget was $175 million, and the box office was $731 million.
Well, Pixar do that pretty reliably. They do that kind of business pretty consistently.
Yeah, even with their latest movies, which, I've not seen, I'm not interested in, I don't think they look that great, even that's making good money.
Yeah. So, they're great mass entertainers. What can we say? Like I said at the beginning, sometimes the consensus is just on point.
Yeah.
And I love this movie.
You can't get more in the way of consensus on this one. I mean, where is it? And, Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 98%.
Sounds about right.
Based on 280 reviews, an 8.6 review average from the critics, I think, yeah.
8.3 on IMDb.
I mean, it's a good movie. I know.
It's pretty much the closest thing to an objectively good movie it's possible to get.
Yeah, I think that's fair, actually.
And it is... I don't really keep up on kids' animation these days. I've got to say, it's not really something I really seek out at the cinema, no matter how prolific it gets. But for what it's worth, this is really an extraordinary film, regardless of your age group. It really is one that pretty much transcends demographics.
Yeah, I mean, it won two awards, Best Animated Feature and Academy Award for Best Original Score. And that's something we've not touched upon, Andrew. We probably should just briefly touch upon this at the end.
That actually surprises me. That actually surprises me, to be honest, because that's actually one thing I was going to single out, is that I didn't think the score was particularly special.
Well,
it didn't particularly grab me in any way. It's perfectly nice, but there's not really any especially memorable motifs, I didn't think, and It's a bit syrupy at some points. I think it could have stood to have been a bit less obvious at
It's
times.
actually interesting. It's actually won a few things. It won the Academy Award for Best Original Score, the Grammy Award for Best Score Soundtrack Album, and the Golden Globe Award for Best Original Score, and the 2010 BAFTA Award for Best Film Music.
I guess I just don't have any taste then.
But that's the thing. I completely agree with you. I can't even
Really?
think of what the music is like. I can't get it off the top of my head. It's that uninteresting and unappealing. I could not even hum you the tune to it.
No, I mean,
Ah.
I think there was maybe one moment that stood out to me, which is early on where the house originally takes flight, is that Carl drags his fingers along some of the balloon strings in his chimney, and he gets a little. It's like they produce musical notes. Yeah, and I think there's a moment after that where the soundtrack just sort of momentarily imitates the sound that he was getting from the balloons, and that I thought was quite a clever little moment. Other than that, I basically didn't notice the soundtrack at all.
Yeah, I'm very surprised it got so much in the terms of accolades for music. I'm very surprised by that.
Yeah, so I don't know, but in pretty much every other regard, I love this film.
Doug the Talking Canine was awarded the Palm Dog Award by the British Film Critics as the best canine performance at the Cannes Film Festival, winning over the fox from Antichrist and the black poodle from Inglourious Bastards. I'm sorry, look, I'm all up for awards and rewards and things like that, but
Those
we
best awards I've ever heard of.
are we awarding the dogs in movies? He's
Apparently.
not a real dog. He shouldn't have counted.
And yet, Tom Hanks doesn't get nominated for an Oscar for Captain Phillips. It's like you have to wonder sometimes, don't you?
Forget Tom Hanks, poor Leonardo DiCaprio. Give the man an Oscar.
Well, he got a nomination, you know.
Oh, come off it.
It's an honor just to be nominated.
I suppose. Do you get Oscar nominations for or equivalent for podcasting? I wonder, because I don't think they have my address to send my nominations to. You see,
Well, we'll have to fix that, won't we?
we will have to fix that at some point. So I'll get in touch with them so that they can send the awards and the huge check that comes with it. Of course,
Of course,
yes,
naturally.
So other than that, that's pretty much good for me. Do you think there should be a sequel, Andrew?
To Up? No, I don't think so.
No.
No, I think the emotional resolution to this film was pretty much perfect, and it's done everything it set out to do. Now, like you say at the beginning, the only Pixar movie I want a sequel to is The Incredibles.
That's true. It's true. But so if that's all from you, Andrew.
That's all from us for this week, I think, Daniel.
Yeah,
So
and next week.
we're doing one of my picks once more, and it's more like one of my kind of movies. A lot more headshots.
You mean it's obscure and nobody will have heard of it?
It's not that obscure. It's got Colin Farrell in it.
Alright, okay.
It's Seven Psychopaths. Seven Psychopaths.
I've never heard of it.
Seven Psychopaths.
Would you please stop saying that?
No. I'll say it a lot next episode, so...
That's fair enough. So anyway, I think we're done here, Andrew.
See you all next time.
Yep, see you all next time.
Bye for now.